start? Would you like? There we go. Are you ready to share some of your work with us?
Yes, I'm ready to go.
Wonderful.
All right, so I'll be reading from my collection, Love and Other Stuff. Just to give some context, the book is split into 4 specific themes. So I'll be reading across themes and then, yeah, we can chat about it afterwards. The 4 sections is love, of course, as the first one. The second one is called intermissions. The third section is about grief. And the last section is about self-worth. So as I'm reading, you will probably pick up on these different themes as well. So I'll begin. The first one is titled Yearning. Sometimes my grandmother holds me with her words. She wraps her love inside a cup of tea made just for me. Her voice is like water on this wildfire, burning deep on hard days. I often wish for her smile and did you eat? As if to say, I see you, I love you, it will be okay. Pay attention to the way they love you when you are sad, when your whole world seems like it's ending. Do they assure you that you are both the moon and the sun? And in between that, you are glorious. So the world cannot end as long as you are in it. Do they love you like that? The last one from the section Love. It would take too many poems to write about you, and I am not in the business of wasting time with words. So here's one. You are the epitome of home. You are every poem about love to ever exist, including this one. I shift over to the section titled Intermissions. It's a very slippery slope as I speak about the odd space between wanting to stay and wanting to leave a space that no longer serves you. The first one is titled Roommates. We don't live here anymore. We are merely keychains hanging on the back door. We are scattered cushions on the bedroom floor. Who's going to pick us up now? We're dirty laundry that won't come clean. I mean, should we even try? I bet you can't even tell when I'm around. I've noticed how you come to bed without making a sound. The gift of giving. You spend all your time giving, worrying about giving, 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 wondering how much more you should give, because all you know is how to give. But giving sometimes means emptying your cup and spending all your time filling it with your own tears. I wonder if the heart ever gives up. I wonder how many times a heart can bend until it gets to be loved in its own language. How many times can it bend until it breaks? The last one from this section is titled Pistol Whip. Sometimes I am thrown into my own traumas, and you tell me to just swim, that the bullet cannot hit me if I am moving. but how can I swim to you when you are the trigger? We'll now read from the next section titled Grief. This is a section I'm very close to, as I'm currently exploring a lot of poetry around grief as well. And I tend to humanize her as the woman who comes to visit us when we least expect it. So here are a few poems from that section. Grief is an unwanted visitor knocking at your door. She sits waiting for a moment to invade your walls. You will wonder where the stench of sadness came from, how the blinds have failed to let the light in. Suddenly, you will find yourself on the bathroom floor, flooding the tiles with her weight. She will leave her footstains by your bedside, forever reminded of the time she never left. Until you welcome her in, you will be stuck with her. So allow her to arrive, wanted, necessary, and maybe then she will leave. Until next time. In breathing in, we are reminded of how much we have held in. A vessel of storms arriving all at once, turning us inside out. And suddenly, in breathing out, we might find ourselves in the middle of the calm, a possibility awaiting us at the shoreline, an arriving, a wave, a redemption, a form of salt on our wounds, touching the tips of our toes. We dare not let it swallow our limbs. Instead, it hugs us, washing us from them, from ourselves, from our fears. A gentle reminder that healing is sometimes a giant that just needed someone to talk to today. So when grief arrives, allow her a place to sit. Let her remove her shoes at the door. Offer her water for her stay. Welcome her with arms open, even when she overstays. And only when she's familiar with the cracked wallpaper in your kitchen, where you have spent your days making tea in the morning, only then will she leave and say, "Here, we grieve, but we do not drown." The last two that I will read from the final section that speaks about worth and that the ability to be seen by others is the ability to see yourself first. You cannot be afraid of being alone. Then you have not yet truly learned to love yourself. You should be your home before others become that. Otherwise, if they leave, where will you go? The last one is titled, "What Do the Stars Say About Us?" I often wonder about the stars. Do they ever look down at us in awe, saying, "Look at them, so magnificent," and they don't even know it? That is the last one I'll be reading from my book.
Wow, thank you so much, Grace. That was a very moving reading. I think we're going to open for questions and comments now. I'm going to pop right in there first. I found how you humanized grief, sort of personified her as a grandmother, very interesting.
Mhm.
And I liked how this is what I interpreted how you spoke about healing. You know, when you watch movies or series and things, you healing is clear cut and there the
Mm.
directions are, but how you speak about it, you know, it's messy and it's confusing. But that's the only way I feel. And
Yes.
that's what I got from your poems.
Yes, I think definitely one thing I highlight or think about when I write my poems around grief is how it is also sort of this cycle, right? I think a lot of people see grief or healing as, like you're saying, it's the beginning, the middle, and the end. But realistically, we're kind of in this loop, trying to find our way through our healing. And it's like you're saying, it's messy and it's ugly. And sometimes there's joy, but sometimes there's tears. And I think the important thing is rather through my words as well is how do I navigate returning to that loop in a better way or a healthier way rather than thinking about, I'm now fully healed. I don't think about it anymore. It doesn't bother me, and personifying grief or loss as this person who will pop in when you're not expecting her, because that's usually how it works. And eventually you start to welcome her in and you sit down with her and you have the cup of tea and you have the chat and she leaves. And I think with each visit, the healing becomes more clearer. That's the way that I picture it. Yeah.
Mm, lovely. Okay, I see Wesley has a question.
Yes, well, Kirsten, hi,
Hi.
Grace. Grace and I go way back, guys.
Wait, wait.
Grace and I go way back. Anyway, I do have a question I wrote down because I didn't want to forget it. It's
Yes.
with regard to meaning specifically. So I'm just thinking about time and how time is relevant, especially for us as women. We go through
Mm,
all these different phases. Especially I'm noticing as I get closer to 30, I know people always say, "Oh, you're young," but each age is relevant. And I really admire the work that you do with women and with young people. So thank you for that. That's something
thank
that
you.
I hope to do myself. Um, so just to know how have you healed or done intention of healing like through each age? Like how have you managed to keep having that intention and not like giving into like the not healing and then just staying unstitched
Mm.
basically?
Sure, that's a very interesting question. Um, and I think I've not thought of it until this moment that you're asking me. To be honest, I think I only recognized my grief probably only in the last 4 years. Having lost my sister 9 years ago, it was kind of going through life in my 20s because I was 25 at the time. Um, and life is fast paced. Things are happening. I'm studying and then it's work. And you kind of, yes, it is there and you mourn that. But you kind of, I think the world also expects you to just carry on. It does not make room for our loss and our grief and our healing. So I think I can't really say that there was a specific thing that kept me through that, through my teens, through my first big loss, which was in my 20s. And only when I hit 30, weirdly enough, for me, there was this light switch. And again, that realization of realizing, okay, we're getting older and our dreams are also shifting and our things are shifting, but a lot of the trauma and the loss is starting to come up. I think also the older we get, the more we know, and the more we know, the more things the things arise. And I think it was quite important for me to specifically through poetry. I think that's really what helped ground me in my grief and understand what it is that I'm feeling. And what does acceptance look like? I think is always the biggest thing with healing is that we think acceptance is, I've accepted it, I'm moving on. But sometimes accepting is living in the reality of not having and not really necessarily saying I'm content with this thing not being here, but understanding that even in that absence, it comes with something that I'm learning about myself. And I think that's the space I'm in now, being in my 30s and realizing also the fact that, like you're saying, time is going. Our parents are getting older, our family is getting older, and you also have this anticipation of loss that is also quite important to sit with at times. And I think that for me, through my poetry as well, it's also writing about understanding that with the loss, um, the love is what is actually highlighted. I don't know if that's the right word, but all the things that I have lost throughout my teens, my 20s, and now is only highlighting how much I've had and how much I got the opportunity to love. And somehow that helps with my perspective on loss, and how I navigate my healing now. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yes, yes,
yeah.
you definitely did, and you sparked so many other thoughts and feelings,
Mm.
and you spoke to so many things that I'm currently going through. Um, so I really appreciate that, and I just want to say, yeah, thank you again, and I'd love to. Can I email you some questions? I
Yes,
don't
of
want to
course.
take over
No, of
the
course.
time. Okay, and
Please
I'll
do.
be in Joburg soon. I hope to see you. I'm gonna be at UJ for
Oh, lovely.
something,
Okay.
so
Send me
I
the
hope to see
details.
you. Thank you,
Awesome.
Grace.
Thank you.
Okay, I see Jacques has a question.
Thanks, Karen. It's lovely to hear your voice tonight here. Ah, Grace, you completely, those poems completely won me over tonight. I
Thank you.
really love them. They really come at a good time for me as well. I'm, I love the way that your poems tolerate grief,
Mm.
um, and live with grief when so much is telling us to be okay.
Mhm.
And I wonder two things. Do you have particularly sort of strong poets of grief that are speaking to you right now that you can recommend? That's the one thing. And the other thing is, I love this image of the heart being loved in its own language, being spoken to in its own
And
language,
oh, yes.
um, and challenging us to check on whether how people love us when we're sad. And I wonder if you could say something just briefly about that, how that's a fascinating.
Mhm.
I love that idea. I love that challenge. If you could say something, what
Yes.
do you, can you say something about what that love could look like that works maybe for you when you're sad?
Yeah. I think that particular poem I wrote, or the section of the book that's titled Intermissions, um,
Mm,
was written in a time where like you're saying, I felt I was not being loved in my own language, and that I could not be myself. And obviously, being human comes with all the emotions that come with it because life comes at us. And I paid particular attention at the time to how do I feel loved, or how does the people around me, how do they make me feel when I'm not having a good day, or when
mm,
something just goes wrong. And I think it's quite important that obviously not for us to wallow in that space, and not to say that the people who love us are meant to you know how do I phrase it, are not meant to encourage the sadness, but do they let
mm,
us sit in it and allow us to discover that for ourselves. And I
mm,
think that's this thing that I was not feeling supported as, is, are we given space to navigate this feeling, whatever it is that we're feeling, and being validated for that? And even on that really sad day, does their love remain unchanged? Because I think that's
mm,
where you really see it, is when
mm,
I'm sad, are you still patient with me? Is there still space for me to be held by you? Do you still understand me?
uh,
Do you still want to know about me? So I
mm,
think for me, what that looks like now is that being given space, and room for me to unpack how I feel. I'm a person who sits for a while before I can figure out the words, weirdly enough, as a poet, to say what it is that I'm feeling. And is there that patience, for me to sit in it and figure it out before I can talk it through? So for me, that's what it feels like now, is being loved and understood in that space, but you're with me. Not to say that you have to be sad with me or not try to make me happy, but if I need that space, is there space for me to navigate what that is for me? I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, completely, perfectly, yes.
And then just to your first question, around poets or writers that I'm currently reading or know around grief. I think Malika Ndlovu is my current read, titled Grief Seed. She writes beautiful work around the importance also of sitting in poetry. I'm sorry, sitting in grief, and languaging that through poetry as well. One of my earliest influences or first encounters of grief in poetry was Naira Waheed. And this was, sure, I want to say 10 years ago. I actually did a theater piece to a poem she wrote about grief. And that was kind of my first sort of encounter with it. But this was before I discovered loss. This is before I had been through any sort of deep loss in my life. And only now, 10 years later, is her work kind of re-resonating with me around her poems around grief. And she speaks a lot about how our loved ones or the love that we have remains a stain on our soul or on our being. And we kind of have to live with that stain. It's not something we can rub out or get rid of. So I found her work to be quite inspiring around being able to sit with grief and what does that look like? Yeah.
Waseed, you say? What's her name again?
Naira Waheed. I'll see if
Wahik.
I can type it
Okay.
in the, sure, I can type it in the chat. I can get this spelling. There we go.
I see Ed has a question.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I do have a question, but I see there are other comments. Matatla Joe got a comment. Kirsten, I see you. Okay, it's been acknowledged your comment about vulnerability and honesty. I don't know if do we want to go to Matatla Joe's question? It was asked before quite a while ago, I think.
Now,
If you
can I read it out? Is that fine?
yes, go
Okay,
for it.
awesome. So the question is, do you think healing can happen without grieving? If not, how can a person who doesn't accept that they cannot heal without grieving start the journey? Sure. Personal opinion, um, I do think it's possible, and I think it's only possible depending on the proximity of love that you had for the thing that was lost. And I'll try and unpack that. I do think that I think we look at grief or grieving as such a negative connotation that it involves being sad and depressed and we're crying but grief, I believe, equally holds joy, and love, because we cannot grieve. I think we know the phrase quite well. We cannot grieve what we have not loved. And why I say then the magnitude of our grief is dependent on the love that we have. If we I don't want to say that we cannot grieve things also that we did not deeply love, because I do believe we can. But I do think that at some point grief happens, and perhaps not in the way that we expect. Because sometimes we might not cry, sometimes we might not um, feel this deep sense of loss. I just watched something the other day that said sometimes grief comes with relief, a sense of relief, and not because we're happy that this thing or this person is gone, but that anticipation of that loss was so heavy that it's almost an exhale. And I think grief is not one dimensional. So I don't know if I can fully answer your question and say, where does the journey begin? But I think it does start with asking yourself the depth or the meaning of this loss for you and what that looks like for you. Because I think grief, like I said, it looks different for everyone. It can take you 10 years before you even begin grieving this thing that you've lost. It can happen in a week and you feel lighter, and that you've already sort of accepted the sense of healing that comes with it. So I don't think that there's a one answer that I can give you, but I hope that my understanding or my explanation of grief, in that sense of it coexisting with a multitude of emotions depending on our relationship that we had with the thing or the person that we lost. I hope I answered you somehow. Yeah.
That's a great thorough answer, I think. I see Wesley Skippers, who's Kirsten, wants to. I can go last. Is the comment in the comment section?
Yes, must I ask you? Yes, sorry. Can I see you
Sorry, Kirsten, the volume isn't very good.
Oh,
Thank you. Great.
I'll come closer. Is that fine?
Yes, that's
Okay.
great. Thanks so much.
Sorry. Do you remember how you felt and process, or rather, where you stored your grief, pain, and your healing, in your different ages as a woman? Do you remember kind of how you went about it, specifically as a 28-year-old woman would be helpful, but any age.
Yeah. Sure. I think, okay, I was 25 when and as a sister at the time was 33. So I felt quite disorientated because it also felt like I was disanchored. And I'd moved away from home for a while. So I'd not seen her for a while as well. And I'm just giving back context because I think it matters what I'm going to say next. Moving into my late 20s and coming into my 30s and realizing the importance of honoring her memory and speaking about her in the way that she was alive. And I think a lot of times with my personal healing and journey with grief with her loss has been honoring the moments that we had. Because I think sometimes we're also, I'm going to jump now, sorry, to another thought that just came to me, but sometimes we feel so guilty of being okay. We feel guilty to be happy because we almost feel like, oh, I can't be too happy because I'm supposed to still be sad about this loss. And I think it's what I was saying earlier is two things can be true within grief. Is it's okay to get to a point where you're thinking about this person or this thing that you've lost and you're smiling about it, not because you're happy that it's not there, but you're honoring what you had when they were present. So I think for me, the healing journey shifting into my 30s became very clear that I need to also stop because sometimes we want to be happy, but we force sit in the grief because it's what we're used to and it's easy. And knowing that it's okay to find the moments of joy, and how do we change or use our language to speak about this person or the things that we've lost in a way that honors what we had, what existed. And obviously we have to re-navigate how we exist in the world. For example, I can't call her anymore when something good happens. So it's like this part of my life that I was so used to that no longer exists. So now I also have to realize I have to restructure my entire being around what do I do now and how do I find that moment to not disorientate me when I want to pick up the phone and then remember that, oh, that's not there. What is the safety net for myself to say she would have loved this news, she would have celebrated in this way. So I think it's a lot to do about or with perspective about our loss and about grief. Not to say that it's not crappy and it doesn't hurt and it's terrible, because it is, but also how do we hold it more gentler for ourselves so that we are safe in our healing, that we are safe in our grief journey, because it is lifelong. I don't believe grief ever ends. We will grieve forever. In every single memory and moment, we will return back to that feeling. So I think it's really about perspective. Yeah, I hope that answers you somehow.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I will. So my Red Wheelbarrow team knows.
Send the
I
email.
will. Thank you so much, Grace. Okay. Then
No problem.
over to you.
And Grace, I have another question. As a drama practitioner and a poet, is there I don't know, a particular exercise or a practice that you can recommend that would help one confront and accept and process grief?
Um, yes, quite a few. I think it's because my current research actually looks at grief. It is actually looking at grief and using poetry and movement as a way to distill and understand grief better. So something that I did in a workshop, and perhaps that will assist. I think it's just important to know yourself before doing it, and know that there's or in a health space. But what I have done throughout the process of the research is that idea of where does grief sit in our bodies? Because I very much believe grief is an embodied experience, that we experience the shock or the joy and everything through our bodies first before we can even find the words for it. So I love to do a writing exercise where if I pull up a particular question, so if you're feeling particularly heavy, where does the heaviness sit today? Feel it in your physicality. So if the heaviness sits in the chest, for example, it's just to sit in that feeling for a few minutes and then quite literally write down that feeling. My chest feels tight. My breaths are quicker or shorter. And finding then the poetry in that writing. I think it helps also for me. I found that it really helps me understand how grief functions in my body and in what ways do I need to quiet it down. So if my chest does feel tight because I've zoned into that, I know now to let me just take a few deep breaths just to release the tension, and understand why that heaviness sits particularly there. And then I find, like I was saying, writing the feeling, and it doesn't have to be poetic. I always say it becomes poetic when you share about the body already. But just to be able to express where that is for me has helped me also unpack my grief and find my healing in those experiences. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. Thanks. I see Isa has a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, it's Isa.
Isa, sorry.
Yeah. No problem. Sorry, I'm not gonna show my face. Thank you so much for sharing the work you shared with us today. It's very insightful. My curiosity is also just around the drama or your practice or the process thereof of presenting, your poetry on stage. presenting the grief, if I can put it that way, or acting the grief. If it's acting it, you don't know. Just like what your process is, what kind of poems do you think how do you choose which poem best represents a specific feeling, as well as with the kind of movement you choose to go along with it? Is it what naturally feels with that? Is it like a story or a memory that you associate with the thing? And just how you put that together. Like, I'm just curious about the process and how it feels to do that over and over.
I think your question comes at such a good time, because I can speak directly to a production that we ran last year. We actually had a final run last month, and it's titled Grieve, That Is How You Survive. And it's adapted from my poetry collection alongside a good friend of mine, Tandu Nganda, who also writes a lot about grief. And we actually put on a choreo poem play. So a play that was deeply poetic, but also lived in movement a lot. So in this process, particularly, we obviously went through the poems around grief first before we found the movement language for it. It was quite difficult because the story is about these two women who are navigating the grief from childhood, or very much um, to 20s into where we are now, and what that looks like. And the characters we play in the production are our loved ones. So we actually play memories that we have with them, and moments that we had with them. And obviously in the production, we had to sometimes do 5 runs over the course of 3 days. And what we found as well through the process of the production and rehearsal phase, in rehearsals, we would not actually fully rehearse. We would not be able to go through the piece seriously. Actually, we would joke around quite a bit, and we found that the reason for this is obviously the heaviness of having to retell the story of our grandmother, of our brother, of our sister, who we've lost. But when we got on stage, and it felt like an honoring, comes back to the thing of an honoring of holding their memories. So the movement, coming back to just the performance of the poetry, the movement came quite naturally to obviously working with metaphors. So the metaphors in the poetry are very helpful, because it kind of allows us to play with, what does a wave coming over me feel like when it's grief, and being able to embody water, for example, or being able to embody dryness. What does that look like in the body? It's static, it's still, it's heavy. So we played a lot with the poems kind of informing the movement in this sense. And they kind of spoke back to each other in that way. So this particular process with performing grief, and it's like you're saying, I always say it's not really a performance. It's us reliving these memories with our loved ones. So the process, this particular process with performing it on stage, was very much informed by the poetry itself, and finding the images in the body, or how it feels in the body, and allowing that to sort of inform the work.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. I see Carrie Kuhn has a question.
Hi. I'm also not going to show my face. Grace, I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say thank you. Your work is so accessible, and there's such a simplicity, but such power and depth. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I wanted to ask if you would reread that final poem, I would really love to hear that again.
Sure. The very last one.
Yes, the very last one.
Okay. Let me go find it. What do the stars say about us? I think that one.
Yes, thank you.
It reads, I often wonder about the stars. Do they ever look down at us in awe, saying, look at them, so magnificent, and they don't even know it? What do the stars say about us?
Thanks, Grace. Beautiful.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Lovely, thank you. Are there any more questions or comments for Grace? I see Ed has a question or a comment.
A very brief comment, because we've covered a lot of ground. Grace, I particularly liked the poems where you used imagery to sort of key the listener or the reader in. So the poems which were, I think you called it intermission, that section, the second section, which
Yes.
were almost like a mini grief thing happening on their own. So it led nicely into the grief section. But there's the imagery of the keychain, the roommate, the keychain, the dirty laundry, all of that. I loved that. And also the image of pistol whip. So you have this. I especially like those moments where the language itself leads one, as well as the sort of psychological, that sort of territory that you're navigating. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions or comments in the chat. I think now I can open the floor to anyone who would like to read a poem or share their work.